Kwame was a 52-year-old man married to Amara, who at 47 looked much younger. Amara was a beautiful woman, tall with long black hair, smooth brown skin, and an elegant figure. She maintained her looks by following a healthy lifestyle and exercising regularly. The couple had been married for 24 years, with their 25th anniversary approaching in a month. Before the discovery that would change everything, they had 2 sons, Kofi and Tunde, both married and starting families of their own. Both sons lived nearby, so they saw them often. Kwame worked for a pharmaceutical company in Lagos, Nigeria, that produced both branded and generic medicines. It was one of the largest manufacturers in West Africa, and the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control (NAFDAC) closely monitored the company. Recently, a NAFDAC inspector found some discrepancies in their records, leading to more frequent audits until the company's compliance was assured. As the VP of Compliance, Kwame had been working long hours and traveling twice a month for the past 8 months to their warehouse in Abuja to ensure everything was in order. The work was demanding, but Kwame was training 3 additional compliance officers to take over the load. The job's intensity started causing problems in his personal life, but they were very close to recertification. Kwame had begun to scale back his workload and planned to retire as soon as the new officers were fully trained and the recertification process was either complete or well underway. He planned to retire by their anniversary but hadn't told Amara, wanting it to be a surprise. One day, Kwame found some time at work for himself and went to the central market to find a jeweler for a special task. He wanted to do something special for Amara for their silver anniversary. He found a small jewelry shop down an alley off the main street. A friend who had used the jeweler for a custom piece recommended the place. Kwame had something similar in mind for Amara as his anniversary gift to her. The owner was a skilled craftsman who had moved to Lagos from Kano 15 years ago. His English and Yoruba were perfect, and Kwame explained what he wanted. He had a 1.15-carat diamond ring that he no longer wore, and the stone was a perfect clear white. Kwame wanted to have it reset into a necklace for Amara, because she had always loved the diamond. The jeweler appreciated the stone and showed Kwame some white gold and sterling silver settings to choose from. Kwame picked one with 3 small diamonds surrounding the large stone that would go in the center. It was magnificent. They agreed on a price, and Kwame gave the jeweler the ring. The jeweler took a picture of it under a magnifying glass and made a copy for Kwame for security. It would be ready in about 2 weeks, just in time for the anniversary. As Kwame walked back to the main street, he glanced to his right and saw Amara coming out of a hotel lobby. Surprised and concerned that she might see him and ask what he was doing, Kwame ducked back into the alley and watched as Amara hailed a taxi. He was puzzled because he knew of no reason for her to be downtown, especially involving a hotel. As Kwame watched, he saw Chinedu, a close friend of his, exit the hotel and approach Amara. Chinedu said something to her, and she laughed before getting into the taxi and leaving. Chinedu walked away afterward. Chinedu was one of Kwame's close friends. They had met when Kwame first joined the company, and Chinedu was their realtor. They became friends, and Chinedu and his wife Suri were frequent visitors to Kwame and Amara's home. Kwame had known them for just over 10 years, and had taken a few trips with them before things got hectic with his job. As the taxi pulled away, Kwame wondered about what he had just seen but decided that maybe Amara was planning something for their anniversary, and Chinedu was helping her. Though Kwame had no idea what they could be doing at a hotel, he decided to wait and see how it played out. That night, Kwame planned to raise some questions at home to see how Amara would respond. Kwame and Amara lived in a large 2-story house in a prestigious neighborhood in Lagos. Kwame had done well in his job and had a comfortable salary. He had also inherited a large sum from his parents, and with good advice from his investment counselor, it had grown to almost twice the amount. Kwame and Amara decided not to touch the inheritance until Kwame retired. The time seemed right, especially since their 2 children had graduated from university and moved on with their own lives. The house was too big for just the 2 of them, but they loved it and continued to live there. Kwame loved coming home to it, and to Amara, who always had a drink ready and waiting. They had a routine that included talking about their day. Kwame thought that tonight's conversation might be very interesting. When Kwame arrived home, he walked into the kitchen from the garage and put down his briefcase. He shed his jacket and tie, placing them on a hanger in the hallway before making his way to the room they called the library. Even though it had few books, Amara was waiting for him as usual. They greeted each other, and she asked how his day went. Kwame responded that it was very productive, mentioning that he was able to take care of some things he wanted to get done, and that he had finished all his work for his upcoming trip to the warehouse. Amara said she had been at home all day, just cleaning and straightening up. Kwame was immediately alerted by her comment about staying home all day. Why would she say that when he had seen her downtown around lunchtime? Amara wasn't very good at lying, so Kwame decided to push it and see her reaction. He asked if she had seen Chinedu lately, mentioning that he needed to tell Chinedu something about a question he had regarding some drugs, and that he thought Chinedu was coming by. Amara claimed she hadn't seen Chinedu since they went to his place about a week ago. The lies were beginning to pile up. At this rate, Amara was going to make a mistake if Kwame pushed too hard, so he decided to ease off. He was far too concerned about what he suspected was happening. Kwame and Amara hadn't been intimate for over 6 months. He had tried to initiate it several times lately, but each time, she had quietly turned him down with some excuse. The last time was Sunday evening when she pleaded a sudden headache at bedtime. Kwame hadn't discussed it with her for fear of making her angry, but now he thought there might be another reason. Kwame suggested they invite Chinedu and Zuri over for dinner that Friday night, but Amara said she didn't feel like having dinner that week, suggesting they plan it for the following week instead. She knew Kwame had to travel next week, and he hated to plan anything for one of those weeks, so he told her he would rather do it this week. Kwame then asked if she had a disagreement with Chinedu that he didn't know about, noticing she seemed uneasy whenever his name was mentioned. Amara became visibly uncomfortable, stood up, and left the room, muttering something about the bathroom. Kwame considered her reactions and answers to his questions, and he knew without a doubt that she was guilty, and that Chinedu was involved. He decided not to push her again when she returned to the room. As she sat back down, Kwame asked if she had thought about what she wanted to do for their anniversary next month. He suggested they could have a party at the house with their friends, including Chinedu and Zuri, Obina and Adana, and maybe the kids and their wives. They could have it catered so it wouldn't be a strain on them. Amara said she hadn't even thought about it yet, and asked if that's what Kwame wanted to do. Kwame said he thought it might be a good idea and that it could be fun since they both hadn't been having much fun lately. He asked if she knew why. Amara asked what he meant and what kind of fun he was referring to, noting that Kwame had been working so hard, leaving them with little time to do much, especially with his trips every other week. Kwame then asked about their love life, saying he hadn't been too tired for that, but she hadn't been in the mood for the last 6 months. He admitted he didn't know what was going on, but it seemed like she had no interest in him anymore. Amara replied that she hadn't been feeling well and that Kwame knew that, insisting it was him who wasn't in the mood. She was angry, but not because of Kwame's probing. She was angry because he was right, and she wasn't going to tell him why. Now, Kwame was almost certain of what was happening. He told Amara he was sorry and would back off, acknowledging that she probably had her reasons, even if he didn't know what they were. Kwame said he would make all the plans for the anniversary dinner next month so she could just relax and let him do the worrying. He also apologized for his comment about their sex life, telling her he would wait until she told him when she felt better. With that, Kwame got up and left the room. He went into his study and turned on the TV, but there was nothing on that he wanted to watch. Kwame needed time to decide what to do. He decided that his upcoming trip would be the key. Amara and Chinedu would be too cautious to do anything while he was home, especially since she was now alert to his suspicions. Though she certainly didn't think he knew anything, she couldn't be 100% sure. The next day was Thursday, and Kwame went into work, making a phone call to a friend in the electronics industry. They had worked together on some projects, and Kwame knew him well enough to confide in him. Kwame explained what he needed, and his friend told him what to buy. Kwame called the supply store his friend recommended and placed an order, which was delivered to his office that afternoon. It helps to have friends in the right places, Kwame thought. Kwame's plan was simple. He had 10 voice-activated bugs, all small and innocent-looking, easy to plant. He also had 2 receivers, one single channel, battery-operated with a range of up to a mile, and one with a range of just under 300 feet. The short-range receiver would go into the house to monitor all the bugs except one, which would be placed in Amara's purse. The other receiver would be in her car, recording any conversations in the car or anywhere she carried her purse, with the receiver in the trunk recording up to 5 hours from a distance of up to a mile. That evening, while Amara went to the market, Kwame placed all the bugs and set up the recorder in the workshop in the basement. He turned on the radio in the spare bedroom and went downstairs to listen. It worked perfectly. Kwame thought he would have to wait until Amara went to bed to plant the bug in her car and purse. Fortunately, she fell asleep early on the couch in the living room, so he glued the bug into her purse right then and there and took the recorder to her car. Kwame set it up in the trunk and did another test. Everything worked perfectly, and now he was ready. Friday went by at a snail's pace. Kwame was desperate to listen to what was happening in the house but knew he would have to wait until after dinner to check. He was torn about what he expected to hear. On one hand, he wanted nothing to be on the tape. He wanted his world to remain just as it was, dull, boring, but safe, with a wife who was still true to him and their marriage. On the other hand, he expected to find that this was not the case, and that Amara was cheating on him. This thought led Kwame to wonder why Amara would cheat, and why she had suddenly stopped their love life. What was the problem, and why wouldn't she come to him to try to solve it? They had been married for 25 years, and as far as Kwame knew, the first 24 had been wonderful years for both of them. They were very much in love and had a great life. What had changed? Maybe nothing had changed, and Kwame had simply been unaware of Amara's actions. Kwame thought about it all afternoon but found no answers. That night, their dinner conversation was non-existent, and they missed their usual "how was your day" conversation earlier. Amara was very moody and seemed to be in another world, while Kwame was keyed up and nervous about what he would find later. They passed the evening with only the mandatory exchanges. Finally, Amara said she was going to bed early and went upstairs to their bedroom. Kwame waited about an hour before walking upstairs to look in on her. Her breathing indicated she was asleep, so Kwame went downstairs to the workshop. He looked at the recorder and noted it had recorded something. He rewound it with a touch and pushed play. At first, he heard the sounds of the phone ringing. It was very clear, indicating the recorder was working perfectly. Kwame heard Amara answer the phone. From then on, he only had her side of the conversation, but he could read between the lines. It went like this. "Hello? Why are you calling me now? What do you want? No, you know I won't meet you today or tomorrow. I won't do anything now until he goes out of town. Yes, same time and place. Goodbye." After that, there was nothing else except a call from one of their kids that Amara took later that morning. There were no further calls that afternoon, and she didn't leave the house, so Kwame didn't need to check the car recorder. He didn't need to check anything else, period. Kwame stayed away from Amara as much as possible that weekend. He was so angry deep in his soul that he knew he had to avoid her. He knew that she and Chinedu would meet again, and despite the pain, Kwame needed to convince himself that he should confirm what he already knew and not stop them. He had enough evidence to know for sure what they had done, but he needed more to convince a lawyer. Kwame wanted to wait until after their anniversary party to tell Amara what he knew, and he had a plan that would make this anniversary very special. The following Wednesday morning, Kwame told Amara he had postponed his trip and would be traveling next week, but that it would be a short trip, leaving late in the morning and returning by dinner. He then mentioned wanting to do some things to prepare for the party and would be back later. Kwame watched Amara smile at him, saying something about looking forward to the party. She waited for another hour before finally going to the phone to call Chinedu. Kwame didn't bother to listen since it was being recorded. He was sure they made plans for a different time. The day went well for Kwame since he was in a great mood and even found himself singing, a rare occurrence. However, this sudden happiness caught Kwame by surprise. Why did he feel so good about what was likely the end of his marriage? That thought cooled him down, and the pain returned with a vengeance. Kwame wondered what he would do next. He went to the basement, rewound the tape for that day, and pressed play. He heard Amara's voice as she called her lover, Chinedu. The conversation went something like this. "Hello? He just told me that he would be changing his schedule for next Wednesday. He's leaving later and will be home earlier. We can still meet at lunchtime, but I have to be home early in case he returns earlier than planned. I don't know why he changed plans, he didn't say. Other than to do some things for the anniversary party. I don't think he knows anything. He would certainly tell me if he did, he wouldn't keep it to himself. I don't know, but I meant it when I said we have to end this. He may not have to travel much anymore. We'll have to talk later." The rest of the conversation was similar, with nothing worth keeping on the tape. Kwame erased it and reset it to 0. Amara was planning to end the affair, but it was already too late. Kwame felt the pain again as he walked back upstairs. He would keep listening and go from there. For the next 2 weeks, Kwame stuck to his plan. Amara and Chinedu kept their meeting that following Wednesday. Kwame couldn't wait. When he returned home, he went out to Amara's car while she was setting the table for dinner. Kwame retrieved the recorder from the trunk and took it downstairs. He checked the counter and noted that 2 hours of tape had been used. He was sure it would be very interesting. Kwame couldn't wait to listen to it after dinner. He told Amara he would be working on some things downstairs and would only be about an hour. She just nodded since he usually spent very little time there anyway. She was just sitting down for her usual evening knitting. Kwame listened to the tape and was rewarded with an hour of them having sex. Amara was doing some things that Kwame considered low-key, but Chinedu apparently enjoyed them. It seemed Chinedu was as unimaginative as he was disloyal. Kwame listened closely to the first part, and then let the rest go as more of the same. What he heard was actually rather dull. For the next few minutes, all Kwame could hear was some grunting and groaning, and the bed squeaking as they went at it. Kwame listened as his heart grew heavier, hearing the sound of his marriage falling apart. He knew he could never forgive either of them. The tape continued for almost half an hour as they carried on. Kwame couldn't understand what Amara was getting out of it. Their sex life had been far more interesting than what he heard that day. At times, Amara actually sounded like she didn't even want to be there with Chinedu. Kwame shut off the recorder and rewound the tape to be safe. He dubbed it and kept one copy in his safe downstairs and the other copy in his briefcase. Kwame thought he would extract some excerpts from some of the phone calls and that meeting to create a demonstration tape for later. He went back upstairs and tried to carry on with the evening as usual, but he felt pain just being in the same room with Amara. Kwame looked at her several times, but she looked perfectly normal. She must have been so used to cheating on him that she felt nothing when they were together. There was one surprising event 3 days before the party. As Kwame listened to the tapes that evening, he heard the sound of the doorbell ringing. Chinedu had come to the house, but Kwame only heard part of the conversation since Amara kept Chinedu at the door. She was yelling at him, saying, "No, not here, not in my home. Never. Anyway, I told you we were through." This continued for a few minutes before Kwame heard the sound of the door slamming and Amara storming back into the house, cursing out loud. It sounded like Chinedu wanted more, but Amara didn't agree. During those weeks, Kwame contacted his lawyer to ensure the divorce papers were ready. He maintained his silence toward Amara, speaking only when necessary and trying to avoid any time alone with her. She finally noticed his reticence and commented on it a week before the party. She said Kwame hadn't said much to her lately and asked if something was bothering him, or if she had done something wrong to make him mad. Kwame told her he didn't know and asked if she thought she had done something that would make him mad. Amara said of course not and asked why he would think that. Kwame reminded Amara that he had mentioned some time ago that they had problems but she wouldn't talk about them. Instead, she got angry and yelled at him. Kwame expressed his frustration, saying that her anger had been her response to everything lately. He told her he just hoped she hadn't done something stupid to get back at him or to hurt him in some way. Amara started to respond but couldn't get the words out. Finally, she broke down and started to cry. Kwame told her he was sorry if he made her cry, that he was just letting off steam, and that he knew she wouldn't do anything like that. He assured her that he trusted her with all his heart and soul, and that he loved her too much to ever hurt her. He hoped she believed that. Amara just wiped her eyes and looked at Kwame sadly. She didn't say anything in response and remained quiet. She finally went to the kitchen, and the subject was forgotten. They spoke little after that, and the tension between them remained. The anniversary party was planned for Friday night, the day before their actual anniversary. Friday was best for most of their friends and children. The party was catered, so Kwame and Amara had little to do other than dress for the occasion. They were together in their master bedroom about an hour before the party. Kwame had decided to end his avoidance of Amara that morning, anticipating the events of the day. Kwame asked if Amara was going to wear the beautiful blue dress he had bought for her the previous year. He told her he loved how she looked in it, as it showed off all her charms, both in front and in back. He did love her in that dress. He had bought it for her when she saw it in a store window and commented on how beautiful it was. He had purchased it the next day, and she was thrilled. Amara said she planned to wear it and that she loved it too, even though she didn't think she looked as nice in it as Kwame said she did. But since he bought it for her and it was their anniversary, she thought it was appropriate. Then she asked what Kwame would be wearing. He told her he would wear just a shirt and tie with a sports jacket because he didn't want to distract anyone's attention from her. Amara blushed with pleasure and smiled for the first time in a long time. Kwame made her to smile and be happy for the anniversary party. He wanted this anniversary to be remembered long afterward. The first guests were to arrive at 7, and they were dressed and ready by 6:45. Kwame looked at Amara in that blue dress and felt a lump in his throat. Tears came to his eyes as he gazed at her. He had loved this woman for almost all of his adult life. She had been his life, and he was about to lose her. The pain was so intense that Kwame had to sit down for a moment before his legs collapsed. He wanted to give her his gift now. The more wonderful things she had to remember from this day, the better. Kwame told Amara that before they went down to greet their guests, he wanted to give her his present. He wanted her to have it for the party tonight. He went to the dresser and pulled out the gold box the jeweler had given him. Kwame took the necklace and moved behind Amara to fasten it around her neck. She moved to the mirror to see herself and said it was absolutely beautiful. Amara thanked Kwame, saying she loved it and would treasure it forever. She turned to show him and moved to give him a kiss of thanks. They shared the moment and then went downstairs. As Kwame followed Amara down the stairs, he thought about what he had told her. It was true that he did love her. That was the sad truth and the one he had struggled with most over the past weeks. Kwame knew that while he loved Amara, he couldn't forgive her betrayal or her failure to confide in him and try to save their marriage. She had turned her back on their marriage vows and on him, and had instead turned to another man, a man Kwame had trusted and respected, a man he would have done almost anything for. The betrayal from two of the people Kwame trusted most in the world was so great that he found himself struggling for breath each time he thought of it. But when Kwame remembered the tape of Amara and Chinedu together, he found the strength to do what he had planned. Everything seemed to be in place, and the caterer was ready. They expected 8 guests, including their 2 children, as well as Chinedu and his wife, and another couple they often spent time with. As luck would have it, Chinedu and Zuri were the first to arrive. Kwame shook hands with Chinedu as Zuri went to greet Amara and embraced her. These were 2 of their oldest friends, and the evening should have been a time of celebration. But Kwame didn't feel much like celebrating, though he had no choice. Chinedu congratulated Kwame, saying he had the best of everything: a beautiful home, wonderful children, and a beautiful wife. What more could he ask for? Kwame just thanked him, replying that he and Amara had been very happy for the last 25 years, but that things were not always what they seemed, and Chinedu knew what he meant. With that, Kwame turned to Zuri and held out his hands for a hug. She was still attractive but had grown heavier with the years. She had once been a beauty, but now she was simply a typical dowdy housewife, overweight and plain. Zuri congratulated Kwame and wished them more years of happiness. Kwame thanked her and said he wished he could count on more years together, but that might not be in the cards. He said this quietly so only she could hear. Zuri looked at Kwame in surprise, but he just shook his head to let her know that now wasn't the time. She took Chinedu by the hand and led him away to the bar for drinks. Kwame watched them go and then turned to look at Amara. She just stood there, looking at him, and asked what he had said to Zuri to make her react like that. Kwame told Amara to just enjoy the party, and that they would have time to talk later. He added that tonight, he just wanted to enjoy their friends and their children, and that it was their 25th anniversary, and they had had 24 wonderful years together. At that moment, the doorbell rang and they were ready for the next guests. Their son Kofi and his wife Nia arrived, followed by Obinna and Adana, and then their other son Tunde and his wife Ifananya. They quickly became immersed in the congratulations of their friends and children. Things soon became chaotic, and Kwame and Amara were separated as they mingled with groups of people waiting to talk to them about the party, the house, and their anniversary. The evening went quickly, and they had a wonderful dinner planned, catered, and served by experts. Everything was perfect, except for 3 people. Throughout the evening, Kwame watched Chinedu and Amara. They circled each other several times but couldn't find a moment alone to talk. Kwame saw Amara finally grab Chinedu's elbow and pull him into a corner. He watched as she spoke earnestly to him for a minute. Chinedu had a huge smile on his face that quickly faded. He listened to Amara, then quickly glanced up to see Kwame watching them. Kwame looked at him for a second and then turned away. He didn't know what happened after that, because his son Kofi accosted him to talk about their plans. Kwame was vague, telling him they hadn't really made any. Kwame kept himself occupied with Obinna and Adana and his sons and their wives until it was time for dinner. Dinner was announced, and everyone filed in. Kwame held back until Chinedu and Amara had both entered. The seating arrangements had already been made, with Kwame's daughters-in-law flanking him on both sides, while his sons surrounded Amara. It was a wonderful dinner. After the meal was finished, Kwame stood up to give a toast to friends and family. He had planned his speech carefully for this occasion. Kwame tapped his knife against his wine glass to get everyone's attention. Once all eyes were on him, he took the opportunity to thank everyone for attending this very special occasion. He raised a toast to everyone present. Finally, Kwame said he wanted to raise a toast to his beautiful wife, Amara. Everyone turned toward her, leaving their backs to Kwame. As they did, Kwame deliberately set his glass down without sipping. Only Amara could see him. After dinner, everyone gathered in the family room to talk and enjoy dessert. Chinedu came over to Kwame, looking concerned. He said he didn't know what was bothering Kwame, but that Zuri and Amara had both asked him what was going on. Kwame told him nothing was bothering him and asked why Chinedu and the women thought something was wrong. Chinedu said he didn't know what they thought, but that Kwame had been acting strangely toward him that evening, and if something was wrong, he wanted to talk about it and try to help. Kwame told Chinedu there was something he could use his help and advice with, so if he and Zuri were free the next morning around 8:30, they should come over for breakfast and talk. Kwame mentioned he could use Zuri's input as well, even though it was early. He emphasized that it was really important and that he would appreciate their help. Chinedu agreed but asked for a hint, assuring Kwame he could keep a secret. Kwame told him not to worry, saying it was job-related but also a surprise. He wanted to tell everyone at the same time, and wasn't even going to tell Amara that night. Chinedu finally agreed, accepting that he would get nothing more out of Kwame that evening. Kwame clapped him on the back and moved away to speak with Tunde. He watched Chinedu talk first to Zuri, and then to Amara. They seemed to think Kwame had a surprise concerning his job, which relaxed Amara considerably. The party was winding down, and the guests were preparing to leave. Kwame circulated the room, saying goodnight and thanking everyone. He was anxious for the evening to end since it had been painful for him from the beginning. The party represented a life that no longer existed. Chinedu and Zuri were the first to leave, followed by Obinna and Adana, and then Kofi and Nia. Kwame's youngest son, Tunde, and his wife, Ifananya, were the last to leave. They spoke with Amara, and then departed. Just before Chinedu and Zuri left, Zuri came over to Kwame, saying that if he wanted to talk before the next morning, he should feel free to call her. If there was a problem, she was willing to help. She gave Kwame a hug while Chinedu looked on, saying nothing. Kwame thanked Zuri and said he would certainly let her know if he needed someone to talk to. He added that he would see them both the next morning. Zuri nodded and left. Zuri's simple statement of caring caused Kwame more pain at that moment than anything Chinedu and Amara had done. The problem with all affairs is that innocent people are always the ones who feel the pain the most. Kwame had made arrangements with the caterers to take away any perishables and return the next morning to clean up. They were just finishing up when Kwame walked into the kitchen. He looked around for Amara but didn't see her. When Kwame asked about her, he was told she had said goodnight and gone upstairs. Kwame waited a few more minutes until the caterers left, then turned out the lights. He had a few things to do in the den before heading upstairs. When Kwame walked into the bedroom, he saw Amara still dressed, sitting in one of the 2 chairs in their sitting area. Kwame walked over to the other chair and sat down heavily. He looked at her and felt nothing but pain, no anger, no desire for revenge, just deep, crushing pain. With difficulty, Kwame smiled at Amara and said he thought the evening had gone well. She returned the smile, but he could see the concern on her face. Amara asked if she could ask him something about the party. Kwame told her to go ahead, saying that a husband and wife shouldn't keep secrets from each other. She asked why Kwame had set his drink down when he made his toast to her at the party. Kwame told her he didn't know and asked what she thought. Amara said she really didn't know, adding that she hadn't done anything wrong and that she hadn't said anything to upset him. Then she asked if she had displeased him in some way. Once again, Kwame told her he didn't know and asked if she thought she had done something to make him angry. Amara said no, insisting she hadn't done anything wrong and had just tried to think of what it could be. She said she didn't know what was wrong. Kwame told Amara he was sorry, but he didn't quite believe her. He said he thought they had some very serious problems in their marriage, but he was too tired to talk about them that night. He told her he would sleep in the guest room, and they could talk the next day. With that, Kwame rose and walked down the hall to the guest room before he lost his composure. Kwame had already removed some things from the guest room, so he went in and closed the door. He had never slept in the guest room in all the years they had owned the house, nor had he ever locked his loving wife out of his bed. The pain of doing that was almost more than he could stand. Kwame checked his briefcase for the things he would need the next day and found everything in place. He undressed, turned out the lights, and lay down on the bed, knowing he wouldn't sleep much that night. About an hour later, Kwame heard a small knock on the door and Amara's voice asking if she could come in. She knocked again, but he didn't answer, so she eventually stopped and went back to their bedroom. Kwame lay there as tears finally came, and he fell asleep, dreaming bad dreams. Kwame woke at his usual time of 6:45 but decided to stay in bed a while longer. He usually got up and was downstairs by 7:15 for breakfast, but he wasn't hungry that morning. Kwame had no appetite. He remained in the room until he heard Amara go downstairs and then went into the bathroom. Afterward, he went back to the guest room and stayed there until almost 8:15 before going downstairs with a heavy heart to face her. When Kwame walked into the kitchen, Amara was sitting at the table, not moving or looking up as he entered. With false bravado, Kwame said, "Good morning. Is there any coffee? I could really use a cup." With that, he walked over to the machine and poured a cup of coffee that had already become rather thick. It had been made hours ago and was now bitter, but Kwame drank it anyway since it seemed appropriate with his mood. Amara still hadn't said anything, so Kwame walked to his seat across from her with the morning paper and his cup of bitter coffee. He waited for Chinedu and Zuri to arrive. Kwame hadn't told Amara they were coming, so it would be a surprise when they showed up. As Kwame folded his paper, ready to read, Amara looked up at him and asked in a very quiet voice if he suspected her of something, and if that's what this was all about. Kwame saw that she had been crying, but he really didn't want to get into it until her lover was present. But if Chinedu and Zuri weren't on time, he couldn't avoid it. Just as Kwame was about to say something, the doorbell rang. Amara looked up in surprise and wiped her face before going to the door. She opened it to see Chinedu and Zuri standing there. In a surprised tone, Amara asked what they were doing here at this time of morning, but Chinedu answered that Kwame had invited them the previous night. He was surprised that Amara wasn't expecting them. Zuri noticed Amara's tear-streaked face and asked if she was all right, saying she looked like she'd been crying. Amara insisted she was fine and welcomed them in. She then went to find Kwame, asking him what he had done and why he had invited Chinedu and Zuri that morning and what was going on. Without answering Amara, Kwame walked into the hallway to greet Chinedu and Zuri. In a booming voice, he welcomed them. Once everyone was seated, Chinedu and Zuri side by side on the couch and Amara in her favorite chair looking frightened, Kwame walked over to his briefcase and pulled out two 8x10 manila envelopes. He moved with them to the center of the room and faced all three of them. Kwame told them he had given this a lot of thought and had some surprises for each of them. He explained that he had been working very long hours and traveling more than he should have, but he felt it was necessary. He added that a lot of people were depending on him, and he couldn't let them down. Kwame mentioned that he had hired 3 new officers who were finally able to handle the job by themselves. It had been his plan to retire as soon as he felt he could leave, and that time was now. He then revealed that he had resigned from his job a week ago and told himself it was time to rest. Amara, shocked, asked why Kwame hadn't told her about his decision, insisting she would have supported him and that she knew his job was getting him down. Chinedu chimed in, saying Kwame didn't have to work for a company that didn't care about what was best for him and that they should try to do without him for a while. Kwame was glad to see that they both supported his decision. He then announced that he was planning on taking his wonderful wife on a trip starting on their 25th anniversary and that he had booked a flight to Accra. From there, they would pick up a sea cruise. Amara, confused, asked what Kwame meant by planning on taking her. Kwame paused for a moment, knowing that once he revealed the truth, there would be no turning back. This was the moment of truth. Kwame then dropped the bombshell, telling Amara that he thought the trip would put a strain on her Wednesday afternoon meetings with Chinedu at the hotel if she wasn't going to be around. Immediately, all 3 faces fixed on Kwame. This was the moment of reckoning. He walked over to the table and pressed the play button on the recorder sitting there. Kwame had made a tape with excerpts of their conversations. He thought the first few words of their last Wednesday meeting would be most appropriate. From the small speakers, they heard Amara's conversation with Chinedu. Kwame turned off the tape and watched the faces of the 3 people staring at him. Amara looked like she had just been slapped across the face. She went still, her eyes wide open. Kwame had never seen her as pale as she was then. She fell back into the chair, covering her face with her hands, and softly said, "Oh, please God, no." Kwame turned to Chinedu, who had a look of shock on his face as well. But what was more interesting was the expression on Zuri's face. She was furious. Amara was now sobbing openly, looking at Kwame with tear-filled eyes, asking how long he had known and pleading for a chance to explain herself. Zuri jumped up from the couch, anger and fury on her face. Chinedu also stood just as Zuri let him have it. She slapped him with her open hand as hard as she could, glaring at him as he staggered back. The slap sounded like a crack of thunder. Zuri was on a roll, and Chinedu looked as though he had just swallowed something rotten. She then turned on Amara with real venom, accusing her of ruining 2 marriages and declaring that Chinedu was a lousy lover anyway. Kwame decided he had better step back into the conversation before Zuri killed somebody. He asked Chinedu to get out of his house immediately, saying he never wanted to see or speak to him again. He reminded Chinedu that he was supposed to be a friend, but had stabbed him in the back. Kwame then turned to Zuri, saying he had something for her that she would want to take. It was a complete record of the phone calls between Chinedu and Amara, including some very graphic parts. Kwame handed her a bulky 8x10 manila envelope, suggesting it would help if she intended to divorce Chinedu. Zuri took the envelope and stormed out of the house, with Chinedu trailing along behind her. He seemed completely confused and lost. Kwame really hoped Zuri would make Chinedu's life a living hell from that point on. Kwame turned to Amara, who was still sobbing and watching the whole sorry situation between Chinedu and Zuri unfold. She must have known by then that she had destroyed Chinedu and Zuri's marriage. Kwame congratulated Amara, sarcastically telling her that Chinedu and Zuri were 2 of their oldest friends, and she had succeeded in destroying both of their lives. He asked if it was worth it, reminding her that Zuri was a wonderful, kind woman who didn't deserve what she and Chinedu had done to her. Amara continued crying, begging Kwame to let her explain. She insisted she had been so busy and lonely, and that Chinedu was only trying to be a good friend. She admitted they had taken things too far but promised it wouldn't happen again. Amara pleaded with Kwame to forgive her and let her make it up to him. Kwame waited patiently until she finished. It was no more than he had expected from her. He told Amara that after discovering her affair, he had done a lot of thinking. He had gone through days of pain because of her betrayal. Kwame wondered what she was capable of, and whether she had done this before with others. He questioned whether he could live without her if he were to leave. He also thought about their boys and what they would think. Amara cried, saying they didn't have to tell the boys, and insisted she had never done anything like this before with anybody else. She claimed that she and Chinedu had only met a few times in the last 2 months and begged Kwame believe her when she said she loved him and wanted to be with only him. Amara added that Chinedu was just there when Kwame was gone, complimenting her on the way she looked and being so friendly. She said she was lonely, and Chinedu was there for her. Kwame told her he understood what she had done but not why she thought it was acceptable. He could have forgiven her if she had come to him and insisted they try to find out what was wrong in their marriage. He could have accepted it if she had confronted him and insisted they go for counseling. But Amara never bothered. She never tried to fight for their marriage, even when Kwame asked her about it. Instead, she turned to another man and gave him everything she had promised only to Kwame. He told Amara he could never forgive that, now or ever. With that, Kwame handed Amara the second of the 2 envelopes. He told her they were divorce papers that he had drawn up last week after quitting his job. He assured her that she would be well taken care of, explaining that he wanted the divorce to be simple and quick. If she didn't contest it, Kwame would leave her the house and a nice sum of money. But if she contested it, he would use everything he had from her affair in court and would fight to take everything, leaving her with nothing. Amara fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, and screamed, "Please, Kwame, I'm sorry. Let me try to make it up to you. You have to give me a chance to make it right." Kwame's face remained impassive as he looked down at her. The woman he had loved for nearly 3 decades was now a stranger to him. The pain she had caused him was too deep to simply forgive and forget. He shook his head slowly and replied, "Amara, I've thought about this long and hard. You made your choices, and now I have to make mine. I can't live with the betrayal, and I can't pretend that everything is fine. It's over." Amara's sobs grew louder, and she clutched at his legs, begging him to reconsider. But Kwame gently pried her hands off and stepped back, putting distance between them. "You have the divorce papers. Sign them, and we can both move on with our lives. I'll leave you the house and enough money to live comfortably, but I need to go and start fresh. We're done." Without another word, Kwame turned and walked out of the living room, leaving Amara crumpled on the floor, her cries echoing through the empty house. He made his way upstairs, where he had already packed a small suitcase with the essentials. He took one last look around the home he had shared with Amara for so many years, then headed down the stairs and out the front door. The air outside felt different, heavier somehow. Kwame took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of his decision settle over him. He was free, but it didn't feel like the victory he had imagined. It was a hollow freedom, one that came at a great cost. As Kwame got into his car and started the engine, he glanced at the house one last time. Through the rearview mirror, he could see Amara standing in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen, her face a mask of despair. For a moment he hesitated, wondering if he was making the right choice. But then the memories of the betrayal, the lies and the pain came flooding back, and he knew there was no turning back. He pressed his foot on the gas and drove away, leaving behind the life he had once known. The future was uncertain, but Kwame was determined to face it head-on. He had learned a valuable lesson, one that would shape the rest of his life. Trust was fragile, and once broken, it could never truly be repaired. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The divorce was finalized quietly, with Amara signing the papers without contest. She remained in the house, living a lonely existence, haunted by the mistakes she had made. Kwame, on the other hand, found solace in new surroundings. He traveled to Accra, as he had planned, but instead of the romantic getaway he had envisioned with Amara, it became a journey of self-discovery. Kwame spent his days exploring new places, meeting new people, and slowly healing from the wounds of the past. He found peace in the simplicity of life, away from the complexities that had once defined his world. He even took up writing, documenting his experiences and thoughts in a journal. It was therapeutic, a way to process everything he had been through. One day, as he sat by the ocean, watching the waves crash against the shore, Kwame realized that he had finally let go of the anger and bitterness that had consumed him. He was no longer the man defined by betrayal and loss. He was simply Kwame, man who had loved, lost, and learned to live again. In the end, Kwame never returned to Lagos. He built a new life for himself in Accra, one that was filled with meaning and purpose. He became a mentor to younger men, sharing his story and the lessons he had learned about trust, forgiveness, and the importance of self-respect. As for Amara, she lived out her days in the old house, a shadow of the woman she once was. The memories of what she had lost never left her, and she often wondered how different her life would have been if she had made better choices. But regrets, as she learned too late, could not change the past. Kwame's sons, Kofi and Tunde, respected their father's decision to leave, though they never fully understood the reasons behind it. Kwame never told them the full story, choosing instead to let them believe that their parents had simply grown apart. It was a kinder version of the truth, one that spared them the pain of knowing the real reason for the split. In the end, everyone got what they deserved, or perhaps what they didn't. Life went on, as it always does, and the world kept turning. But for Kwame, the future was brighter, filled with the promise of new beginnings and the hope that one day he might find love again. This time, he would be more careful with his heart, more protective of the trust he gave. And that, as they say, is the story of how Kwame's marriage of 25 years came to an end, and how he found the strength to start anew. The moral of the story is that trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once it is broken, it can never truly be repaired. Betrayal leaves lasting scars, and while forgiveness may be possible, forgetting is not. The story also teaches that self-respect and dignity are vital, and sometimes the most difficult decisions, such as letting go, are necessary for personal growth and healing. Life is filled with challenges that test our strength, values, and trust. In Kwame's story, we witness how betrayal can shatter a once happy life. Yet, it also shows us the importance of courage, self-respect, and the ability to move forward even when everything seems lost. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it can never be fully restored. Let Kwame's journey remind us that we must cherish and protect the relationships we hold dear, but also know when to walk away with dignity if they no longer serve our well-being. Remember, it's never too late to start anew and find peace within ourselves. O Allah, the most merciful, we seek your guidance and strength in times of hardship and betrayal. Grant us the wisdom to make the right decisions when faced with challenges, and the patience to endure the pain that life may bring. Help us protect the trust we place in others, and give us the courage to let go when trust is broken. O Allah, heal our hearts and guide us to a path of peace, forgiveness, and renewed faith in you. Ameen.